Well, then, I guess that's the end of the game. Unless there's something after the credits. Um, I'll skip the credits here. Yep, that was the end of the game. So, there's surprisingly little to unpack there. This game was pretty heavy handed in its messaging. Um, Basically, they labeled everybody who wasn't them and the librarians a fascist. And the game was just a cacophony of buzzwords and social justice themes. Um, there was some interesting bits, but they all involved side characters who were only around for like 10, 15 minutes. Um, that was really the highlight of this game. The fighting was absolutely terrible. Um, the the music things were absolutely terrible, and they didn't play well at all on the keyboard. Um, the visuals were okay. I really didn't mind them. I thought that was probably the best part of this game. Uh, yeah, there's not really a whole lot of good to say about this game. And like I've said before, I actually legitimately tried to come into this with an open mind because usually when people, you know, say something is woke or whatever, they don't really have a full context on it. But honestly, this was way worse than anybody's been letting on. I have a feeling that the Steam reviews are probably quite good for it. Let me just uh, because the people wanting to actually buy this game are their demographic, which obviously is not that many people. Let's actually just try and swap. Uh, is it me? I'm just trying to get the other thing on the screen here. So you can tell I'm actually not an expert on what I'm doing with OBS here. Browser. Browser will probably work. Wait, OBS project browser? What? Oh, that's not what I wanted at all. Okay, so let's read a few reviews here and pick them apart. I am enjoying this game so far. I love how the dialogue system works and how much detail there is. I guess the dialogue system did work quite well. That is a positive, I guess. They coded that well. Um, the only issue I really have with that is that there was quite a few instances where um, the choice you made wasn't really the choice you were making. So, say for instance, something was a word with a question mark, like indicating maybe you would ask them about a topic, but instead you end up like berating somebody about the topic. That was very weird, but um, that system was okay for the most part. I didn't really like how there's a lot of times that it forced you to actually use your Vox to get what you want. And it did really heavily force you to do that. So that's that was not cool with me because if you want to play like I was trying to play with a more kind of not shouty character, then it wasn't really working well. Okay, the whole experience really feels like a road trip, and the characters are fun to hang out with. This I disagree with. I guess the camping scenes were somewhat okay, but I didn't really find people fun to hang out with at all. One thing I found weird though is how they refer to themselves as refugees and outcasts while being affluent and in no immediate danger, aside from the trouble they create for themselves. It comes off as a little tone deaf. I wholeheartedly agree with that. That was definitely a problem. uh, if Steam had an option for, I kind of can't recommend it, but I also recommend it. That's what I would end up giving it after 8 hours. I'm not in that camp. At the end of part one of my playthrough, I might have said the same thing. Unfortunately, he only has 10.2 hours on record, so that would be about where I was after the first playthrough because the first part of this was 9.5 hours that I did streaming, so that's probably about where he was. And that's about where I would say the same thing. But as the game went on, I wouldn't recommend it at all. The game presents a conundrum with its fascinating world building, kind of, and intriguing concepts. Yet the narrative, specifically the writing, seems scattered. Yes, the writing is very scattered. Um, it contradicts itself a lot of the times as well. Even simple things like getting the characters correct. Like, for instance, Theo was initially introduced as an electrical engineer, and then he's a software engineer, and then he's a hacker. So, like, there's no consistency with that, and they did that with Psy and Gnome as well. So, there's very little consistency, and even the factions, they kind of flip flop as to like what's the good faction, what's the bad faction kind of thing. Um, Very little consistency in that respect. Throughout the game, you are hearing some of the best writing in games. No, I wholeheartedly disagree with that. That feels lovingly grafted and designed. I disagree. And then next, you are witnessing dialogue that feels like a placeholder for the Big Bang Theory episodes. Well, yeah, kind of. I don't know. I don't hate the Big Bang Theory. It's better written than this was. Game takes place in 2030. Why are people still referencing Army of Darkness? That movie would be almost 40 years old at that point. No one would remember that movie except the writers of the game, of course. I do agree with that, yeah. Pax, the protagonist, swings wildly from being a benevolent soul eager to assist others to a remorseless manipulator extorting money and joyfully talking about deceiving charities. Yep, yep, that happened throughout the entire game. It's perplexing to say the least. Much of the writing to me feels like Buffy the Vampire Slayer in the sense they are trying to capture a very specific generation's way of talking, but ultimately it just sounds like some 40 plus year old writers trying to sound like 20 something year olds. It's weird and fascinating, it's problematic. Yeah, and I actually feel the same way about this. It does feel like old people trying to sound young, but their characters are actually older than they're sounding. I think that's a very good observation on his part, because most of the characters were actually in their 30s. Eli and the girl who didn't actually talk were the only characters that weren't 30 or above. And yet they were all talking like teenagers for the most part. It's the type of game that deals with themes and ideas that are so massive and complex to convey in a holistic and genuine way that you as a player end up feeling like you can actually hear/see the writer's room and has tons of notes on a whiteboard. That's a whatever. The game's combat system and Guitar Hero sections are maybe the best part of the game. I wholeheartedly disagree with that. I thought they were both very clunky. So we'll take this one at a time. So combat system. I couldn't ever lock on anybody, and I couldn't turn. Like if I defeated somebody and went to turn toward the next enemy, I would just not turn at all and just keep attacking the guy that's already dead. And sometimes you could hit people on the ground, sometimes you couldn't. So it was usually a better idea to just ignore the people that fell to the ground and hit somebody else. But like I said, you couldn't really turn properly, so you'd end up just swinging above the head of the guy that's on the ground. The Guitar Hero sections, I think that would have been a lot better if they actually made it like Guitar Hero or something, where it was just a bar you were trying to match the notes to. Their little circle within a square thing actually made it very hard to anticipate which notes would come first. So, say if there's an A and a W to hit, that were very close together, I would sometimes hit like the W first and then the A when it would actually be the inverse. And for some reason, uh, the ones on the D key were very sparse, but when they happened, it was actually really hard to see them. Uh, yeah, this person saying combat feels snappy and responsive. There's even a skill tree, which was not expecting. Yeah, that's the bad upgrades, which actually did feel like they mattered, but by the time you get fully upgraded, there's like no game left. And I picked up everything I could to upgrade it. Since the game is focused on using words as a weapon again multiple times, it comes off as sounding like a teenager, someone in early 20s. Yep. This might be a situation where this would make much more sense to a different audience, but a lot of word based combat just sounds silly to me. In the game, you get a chance to write a song, and I generally thought these songs were okay. Actually, aside from the first song, which is the one everybody's mocking, the songs were somewhat passable sounding. They weren't quite as cringe, but they were still pretty bad. Um, as for the word combat, they're too similar. There was the trigger that really gives yourself a boost, like gives yourself a buff that's in particular against the robots did a lot. But everything else, like every other thing that you could do, basically the effect was the same. So there was really two things that you could do. Everything else, you know, it, there was what, like six words, and yet in reality there was basically two. Um, these are very. We just started a punk band. I have no idea what we're doing, but it's completely woven in a narrative and makes perfect sense. Yeah, it does make sense. And I thought overall, especially the concert in Chicago, that was actually a very passable way of implementing that. Unfortunately, that just all kind of went out the window partway through the game, where our band cover story just didn't, you know, wasn't used at all anymore. Ultimately, I will end up finishing the game because it intrigues me. I'm not hate playing it, but I'm also not love playing it. You'll hate play it later. Dustborn is a roller coaster video game of stupid and greatness, a blend of the absurd and sublime, the brilliant and the bewildering. It's a love hate relationship, but above all, I just can't stop playing it. Well, obviously, you did stop. This is. Oh, it's only posted yesterday, but. Oh, they have played a bit since then. Okay. I agree with some of what they said. Yeah. And at that point, even at that 10 hours in, I still felt that way. But it'll go downhill from there. Uh, I'm writing this. Okay, so a little bit more. I'm writing this while the thoughts are hot in my head. I generally think the game is trying to do good, and you can feel the passion of the team everywhere. The representation's great. Yeah, tons of representation. I think they had a blast writing it, and that's why I'm giving it a thumbs up. Uh, I, yeah, they might have had a blast writing it. I'm not sure. We need more games like that. Well, I do agree we need more games with passion in them. But because there's a but, it's a choice based game, and I've been through several occurrences where it really felt like the game was forcing my hand to do things I really didn't want to do for story's sake. I touched on this before, where your choices were often like ham fisted and ramrodding you to do something, and yeah, I hate that. I did reload a bunch of times to see if I was missing things to do or say parts differently, but no. They clearly did a good job about feeling bad when you use your power. At the beginning, and then it kind of goes away. She stops caring about how she uses her power partway through. They feel bad every time, so I really have mixed feelings, and I think I'll have a hard time continuing, sadly. Game is well done, interactive drama game with a few interesting ideas sprinkled in such a band minigame. I do recommend picking the less combat option. Yes, at the beginning of the game, as a combat just isn't the best. I definitely agree with that. I really, really wish I would have chosen the less combat. I wanted the full combat because I thought it might have opened up more actual story in it, because some games do that, and no, this is one where I would have preferred to just skip all the combat. Grab a blanket, grab a drink, and enjoy the story. Edit, I finished the game, and it remained a pretty good experience the entire time through. Combat never got much better, and I wish there were more band segments, but it was an enjoyable experience as someone that loves interactive narrative games. Um, I love interactive narrative games as well, but I don't really think it was a worthwhile experience. This, if anything, it just felt really, really ham fisted with how it did things. And I don't think if anybody is in that middle ground, like morally of like what they support, I don't think this will reach out to them and convert them to their way of thinking at all. But the people that already are like all about diversity, equity, and inclusion kind of stuff, they might like this game. Dustborn is great for narrative enjoyers. I love the character development and the characters so far. It really feels like being a part of the crew going on a road trip. I love the art style as well. Oh, this is only 1.7 hours on record, so they haven't really played it. I'm 8 hours in with plenty to go, and the in-game roadmap is anything to go by. Well, that gets tossed out the window halfway through. In fact, less than halfway through, really. Uh, but I figured I'd drop my current thoughts for people trying to figure out if this game is for them. I'll get the easy stuff out of the way first. If you're looking for an action game, look elsewhere. I agree with that. There is combat, which you can make easier or less frequent, but it's not the primary focus, and I think that's mostly just okay. That being said, you do keep getting new things to try out as you go, and that keeps it kind of fresh. Not really. One of the cool things about the game is that the powers you get for combat can also be used on the story side of things. Okay, so when they're talking about that, they're talking about the Vox powers. I think that they worked better on the story side of things than in the actual combat. Like I said, in combat there's basically two things that they do. On the story side, it actually somewhat has a difference between them, which brings 19 hours. So yeah, they might have finished it. It brings me to the reason you should pick up the game, the story, and the characters. Now, if you're the type of person who saw the promo images and thought they looked too divisive and political, you're not going to be able to handle this game. I wholeheartedly agree with that. It actually is way, way, way worse than the promos and even the stuff online. The stuff online is not comprehensive at all because most of the reviewers and stuff just didn't play the game, or they played a few hours and that was it. It actually gets way worse for that. So should we go find a game that's good for you? Dustborn is unapologetically those things. Yes, it is. And that's a part of what makes it interesting, along with its unique setting, of course. The game is also very good at setting up mysteries you want to know the answers to. For example, what's with the squids? I'll stop there for potential spoilers. Okay, the squids are never really properly answered. Like, we interact with a giant squid that helps us out at one point, and it just goes away, and we never see the squids again. And that was not explained at all what they even are. What I really want to talk about and praise is the relationship system. Instead of trying to win favor with everyone by getting on their good side, i.e., pick the right answers, the choices you make influence the characters toward one of three paths. Those paths are different for each character, making Pax's relationship dynamics with each of the companions unique. For instance, Theo's path will determine whether he's more friend, a boss, or a dad to Pax, while Sai's path will determine whether she reacts more aggressively, more kindly, or wisely. All these paths have perks and drawbacks. Depending on the character's current path, they may or may not be more willing to do certain things. In my games, I refused to do something because it didn't seem like the smart thing to do, and Theo helped me because he trusted me as his buddy. It's a really neat way to make the less key choices matter. I actually do agree with that. They handle the relationship things pretty well for the most part, aside from, like I said, there's times where, say, you're trying to ask a question, but instead Pax just berates the person. Uh, Stuff like that I really hated about the game, but in general, the relationship system was fairly well done. Let's talk about what they do with the gifts real quick. You can pick up a bunch of gifts items throughout the story, but instead of just giving them to characters for points, Dustborn does something a bit more interesting. The timing matters. The first opportunity you see to use a gift isn't always going to be the ideal time. Sometimes it's better to hold on to an item for a later benefit. Maybe I'm kind of silly for loving that, but it makes the relationships feel more real. Um, I don't really agree with that because the game actually won't even allow you to gift something to another person like as soon as you pick it up, kind of thing. So you always have to hold on to it for a little bit of time, and then that time's generally the time you want to give it to them anyway. So I don't really agree with that. What I did like about the gifting system was, say, Sai gave Pax a comic, and then I just gave it back to Sai later on, and it really offended her. And I actually love the fact that that could happen because I'd completely forgotten she gave it to me, and that was because mostly, it doesn't matter. It just goes in my inventory, and that's it. So it was neat that I could give it back to her, and she just got super offended by it though. Uh, feel well realized, and characters feel well realized and three dimensional. Kinda. Their banter is a lot of fun. At times. At times, their banter was good. Other than that, I dig the comic aesthetic throughout the game, like chapters and the chapters being different comic issues is a lot of fun. And I like you can check on your key decisions by looking at the in-game comic. I also like that we get Pax's thoughts through comic style text blocks. Oh, and the rhythm game's pretty fun. Well, the rhythm game sucks, but the comics are kind of. I do like the fact that it highlights in red the choices that you made. Uh, I did like that aspect. So if you did feel like replaying it, then for whatever reason, then you could actually, take note of where those choices were that mattered and change your decisions there. All in all, really enjoying my time with this game so far. It gets a thumbs up. Update: I have finished the game, and I do agree with other reviews saying that the final arc does feel rushed. I think that just goes to show how much more time I want to spend with these characters, though. You're not going to get answers to all your questions, but you do get some pretty cool ones. As far as I'm concerned, the journey is definitely worth it. I yeah, agree. It feels rushed at the end. Like we skip half the map. Uh, so like half our journey is gone right there. Um, some of the characters at the end, like Ruth, we really don't interact with. I literally had one short conversation with Ruth. Nai Nai, I didn't converse with at all. Um, I do like the fact that they just kind of kept what Nai Nai did hidden, though. That was kind of funny to me. But yeah, and you're not going to get all your answers to your questions. Yeah, yeah, we don't. Um, we get surprisingly few answers actually, which is okay if they're setting up for a sequel. But honestly, I won't play a sequel. And my birdie is going nuts for some reason, so I guess I will end that here. Hopefully, uh, hopefully this actually helps you make a purchasing decision one way or the other. Um, I can't say I hated the game as much as I could have hated it, but I definitely didn't really enjoy my playthrough of it. Yeah, I'm just seeing somebody saying update on combat is much more fleshed out than I was expecting. Not really. Oh, they have barely any. They 1.4 hours on record when they wrote this. Yeah. I don't agree. The combat's one of the worst things about this game. It was very tedious, especially the that like flashback that we did in 2D. Thankfully, there were sections of that I could just outright skip because it was just very tedious. But anyway, hopefully this makes it a little bit easier for you to decide whether to play it or not. Not my kind of thing. I do like kind of more visual novels and this kind of text-based game, like Walking Dead style and stuff like that. I really do enjoy, but this one's just not for me. So we'll leave it at that. Have a good day, everybody. I will probably be back playing something else in a little bit. So we'll go with that. I'll see you later.